The views and opinions expressed by the guests of Sasquatch Experience do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sasquatch Experience. Sean the Fork Chop Forker here. Henry May, James Baker, Vance Nesbitt in order of the squares, as you can see there. Folks, thank you for listening or watching and listening tonight here on Facebook, YouTube, and, guys, for the first time on Twitch. So we're streaming on multiple outlets. So welcome to all our listeners, viewers. Glad to have you here back with us this week. Last week, of course, I wasn't feeling too great, so we had to postpone the show. I apologize about that. But this week, we're going to have a good show. As you can see, episode 30, guys, our 30th episode already since we've been back. Wow. The Cook Forest Creature. How about that? 30 episodes, gentlemen. What do you think?
That's crazy.
A lot.
That's cool.
Yeah, it
goes by so fast.
Yeah.
And, of course, listeners, you've been following us know I managed to get all our archive shows back. Now, I pulled them all off the internet and downloaded them to our safe, secure hard drive so that we have those archives perpetually. And I'll be uploading them once we remaster them, slowly but surely, as little bonuses, not just for our Patreons, which, by the way, Vance, they can join for as little as $2 a month, but for everyone. And remember, I guess the big focus that we like to promote with the Patreon is that it's ad-free. Right. So you get the live show, but after that, that's it. You go to listen to it in podcast form, you get advertisements, and that's what keeps the show paid for. Because believe it or not, even though it's free to consume, it's not free to produce. And every month the expenses keep going up, and it costs us about $1,400 a year to make a free podcast. So every little bit helps. If you don't mind, listen to the ads. And $14 million. Yeah, it's a little inflation, but you might as well. But do your part and either listen to the ads and don't complain, or become a Patreon and get them for ad free. And it starts for as little as $2 a month. Go to patreon.com/Sasquatch Experience. But guys, what's on your minds? What's been going on?
Hey, I want to throw a quick shout out to a close friend of the Sasquatch Experience show and wish a one-day belated happy birthday to Shannon Legros.
Shannon, yes.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy birthday, Shannon.
You look great for 60.
Oh.
Wow, that was harsh. We love you, Shannon, and I'm sorry. But that's apparently that's the breaks.
Yeah,
right
well,
there.
the oldest
But
brothers
happy birthday,
are always
Shannon.
supposed to give her crap, so
That's
there
true.
it is.
And it's dinner time. Good night, everybody. No, Henry, what's new with you, brother?
Oh, I've been reading some good books. I read Doug Hychek has produced new versions of Mike Quast's books.
Yeah, very much so.
And I read Big Footage, History of Claims for the Sasquatch on Film, and the Sasquatch in Minnesota. Enjoyed both of them. I have the original versions of both books.
Nice.
Also.
Yeah. Mike Quast isn't new to the field. He's been around for a very long time. Henry, even back in the days of the original version of this show, we talked about Mike and his materials and his books. So I'm glad to see these coming out in new form. And you can get them available not just in print, but also as ebooks. If you prefer a digital outlet, they're available. You just go to Amazon.com and type in Mike Quast, and all his books will populate. You can go ahead and order them up. And actually on the website, I'm creating a new page on our website called The Bookshelf. So different authors we feature on the show and different books that we read and like, we can put up there and kind of, generate interest and everything for the books. Because I tell you what, there's a lot of material coming out. Henry, I go back and think about the days when, we started the show and there just wasn't a lot of material as there is today.
True. That's true. There wasn't. I mean, you had the classic books, like especially from John Green.
Mm-hmm.
And you had the scientists writing books, such as John Bindernagel and Grover Krantz.
Mm-hmm.
But there weren't any books written by people that, like today, it seems like almost everybody's writing a book, and I don't want to say there's anything wrong with that, because I think the more information we get out there and the more opinions we get out there, the better it is for people that are actually getting involved in the search. And you guys know I'm working on our book as well. So I don't begrudge or hold that against anybody writing a book. It's just I guess my commentary is more that it's great to see so many different lenses and opinions out there as opposed to what was just out there before, which was a handful of books, right? Mm-hmm. And the downside to that is it does give an outlet to everybody in their opinion, and well, we know of opinions. I tend to be a little bit more opinionated than others on things, but there's a segment out there a book out there for every segment in this field, guys. If you're a paranormal believer, it's there. If you're a flesh and blood person, of course, that's there. All kinds of things out there. Guys, I was at Cryptid Bash this weekend in Morgantown, West Virginia, put on by our friends the Moth Boys over at the Moth Boys podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great event. Got to hang out with our friend Seth Breedlove and his family, and got to meet Heather Moser. Probably one of my new favorite additions to Small Town Monsters. She's just a wealth of knowledge. Got to hang out with Eric and Carrie Fargiorgio, our crypto fam. A great artist, the Bob Ross of Bigfoot. He's churning out artwork like nobody's business.
Speaking of Seth Greenlove and Shannon LeGros, I recommend seeing on the Trail of UFOs, Dark Sky.
Yeah, it's very good. Very good.
Yeah.
It's not like most UFO documentaries that have been coming out. It kind of takes you. It's almost like Shannon's story in a way. It's her guided, narrated journey through UFO experiencers in West Virginia. It's kind of insular to that state, which is cool because it's, what they wanted to achieve with that documentary. It's put together well. It's probably one of the best looking documentaries that they've done so far. And I say that with every one they do. They just keep getting better and better. And of course, the audio is always top notch. It was just well done, well produced. I enjoyed it myself, Henry. It was really good. And it's available now. To purchase smalltownmonsters.com, I think /shop, you can go and buy the latest On the Trail saga, On the Trail UFOs, Dark Skies.
Mm-hmm.
Love
me a UFO.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we don't talk about here enough, and we Pennsylvania, not just because it's the state I live in, Henry, but you know what I'm going to say, it's the state that puts high strangeness in Bigfoot. A lot of Bigfoot UFO sightings in conjunction here in the Keystone State.
Yep.
Not something I like to, say there's a lot of credence to, but people have been reporting it. And if I remove my own bias from it, you have to admit that there's an awful lot of corresponding sightings of UFOs and Bigfoot simultaneously in the same areas.
Right.
Specifically between in the 1970s, 1973, UFO flap in Westmoreland County. It didn't get any weirder than that for Bigfoot UFO sightings in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You have Stan Gordon, Dr. Paul Johnson, Joan Jeffers, and I want to do a whole show on Joan Jeffers, but I need to get a lot more material. Joan Jeffers was very important to the world of Bigfoot. She was one of the first leading female investigators into the Bigfoot phenomena in Pennsylvania. She really kind of helped keep Dr. Paul Johnson grounded and got him set in the search. She was a nurse by profession, very professional woman. And, in the 70s, when no one was looking into this stuff, she was one of a small group of people that was taking charge. And she was also one of the first women to really do that. And I think in the day and age today where we're celebrating women, we need to do it with candor and true appreciation, not just because it's an in thing, but because there are some really good, solid women investigators that just get passed over, that have paved the way for people like, Shannon LeGros and paved the way for people like Shelley Montana and Amy Boo, people that we really hold in, high esteem. Those roads were made by women like Joan Jeffers. So I think at some point we have to go back and revisit that and, pay some, homage to Miss Jeffers. It's really important. It's really important to me. It always has been. You can go back to past episodes, and I've always been on this, but there's just, you really got to dig deep to get information about her because some people become invisible over time. And you have to start going back and piece it together through people that knew her. And I think that might be something to explore in long form, a little down the road.
No, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, just interesting stuff. Well, we also had, I don't know about you guys, but about 2 weeks ago, I keep hitting the camera. My inbox and Facebook page was just getting blown up by people reporting this really, it just exploded, this Bigfoot picture of a Bigfoot. I guess it was walking through a stream or along a stream or through a river or whatnot. You guys see that? People bombard you with that one?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. It was an older photograph that once again found new life and was just plastered all over my Facebook page.
Right.
And go ahead, Bake.
That's like in Pennsylvania when they had that trail cam of the animal, and we were like, is it a mangy bear? Is it whatever? About every couple of years that pops back up.
Right.
Well, the Jacobs photo is still inconclusive to a lot of people, I mean, I think we know what it is based upon science and, opinion, but you're right. It still shows up every now and then. And, today, of all things, I was talking with Bake, and I kind of got a little pissed. Somebody just out of the blue, I don't know who the hell they are, and must follow us, so if they're listening and I've offended them, I'm sorry, messaged me, and they're like, I want to see your research for so-and-so counties in Pennsylvania. And my first response is, one, who the hell are you?
Right.
And two, what have you done to earn access to that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind sharing information with people, but give yourself a little, one, explain who you are and what you want with it. And two, don't ever think, first of all, I don't know anybody's shit. And the reason why it's not on the internet is because I didn't put it on there.
Right.
And if you can't find it, it's a reason. It's my personal research and my personal data. That's not for anybody else but me and who I want to share it with. But don't ever approach me and demand that I give you something, because I have a giant ass that you can kiss. Both sides, too, if you'd like to. Because I tell you what, that's going to get you blocked quick. I'm just going to block you.
Okay, Sean, just be honest. Express your opinion.
I do. That's what folks come back here for, apparently. Just struck me odd. Like the audacity of somebody. I want your research. Well, kiss my ass. No.
Yeah. Seems to be a lot of that going around lately, though.
That's like what Renee DeHenden said. He said that people would come to him.
Hi, Frank.
And he would say we're just he would say in the past 10, 15 years we're just spinning our wheel. He said nobody asks questions, nobody asks advice,
and
then they come to you and they say they have nothing. They say, why don't we get together and cooperate? You give me all your files for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
No, don't think so.
Go away. I completely, understand that thought process, and it's not that I don't want to share the information. It's that I want to share it with people that are worthy of receiving it. I don't know who the hell you are, and if you just approach me with that, first of all, you're never going to go anywhere. I've worked hard for that over 25 years. That's not for anybody else to take, and I've shared it with people that have been in my inner circle, people in the research groups I belong to. That information's there. It just ain't going out all willy-nilly to anybody, and if that's a little greedy, I'm sorry, but that's, earn it.
Well, you can always get some crayons together and just draw a Bigfoot like a fourth grader and write a couple notes say, here, this is what I've got. Enjoy.
And there goes Baker tossing that word elder again. I'm going to kick him square in the square nuts.
Clearly, they don't understand.
I hate that term elder. Nothing gets up my craw more than well, yeah, people would don't, just demanding things gets on my nerves more than elder. But God, talk about two things that really piss me off: elders and demanders. Get bent. Seriously, it's a little irritating. But we came onto this show tonight to talk about a sighting report I investigated with some really good witnesses, guys. Back in 2000 and oh God, we got to go back a long time ago. 2010. We're going back in time to a place called Cook Forest, Pennsylvania. Cook Forest, guys, is straddles three counties: Clarion, Forest, and Jefferson County, kind of in the northern, the outskirts of northern central Pennsylvania. I think it's like 9 minutes away from the Allegheny National Forest, too. So when you say Allegheny National Forest and you're involved in Bigfoot, kind of start sending out bells, right? Because it's an active area. Well, the Cook Forest is probably the one of the few virgin forests left in the United States that haven't been, contaminated by, logging or what have you. And it has some of the biggest trees I've seen on the East Coast. I mean, these trees are so big you can't even put your arms around them. Huge. And that was one of the things I remarked to my old research partner, Ernie Delp. I actually reached out to Ernie to reconnect and try to get him on the show to talk about this report, because he and I investigated this as well as with a couple other investigators. And, guys, people just move apart over time. And sadly, I haven't been in communication with Ernie for several years, or the other investigators that were working this with us, or even the witnesses. And at this point, I don't know. The witnesses were elderly when I was investigating this, almost 12 years ago. So I don't know if they're with us any longer. But even though that's the case, I'm still protecting their name. I'm not going to give out specific locations or specific names, but I am going to share the report with you, and hopefully you guys will have some questions so we can talk about this a little bit. But one day while checking my email back in the day, I got this. It was actually my voicemail. I got this call from a woman who had seen that we did a presentation out at Over the Mountain Bar and Restaurant, and I got somebody's. There you go. Over the Mountain Bar and Restaurant in Rockton, Pennsylvania. Rockton, Pennsylvania is out in Clearfield County, not too far away from, coincidentally, where I would have a encounter myself years later. And they heard we had a presentation out there, and they weren't able to make it to our presentation, but she was wondering if we'd be interested to come out and meet her and her husband there so they could share their experience with us. And, of course, she seemed like a really nice lady. We called her on the phone, chit-chatted a little bit, took some basic notes, and decided that Ernie and I were going to make the drive up and sit and meet with them. Well, they're both very professional people. She's a nurse, or a retired nurse, and he's a retired school teacher from New York City, actually. Very nice people. When you start getting professional people that report these things, some of the bullshit meter starts to peel back a little bit. You know what I'm saying? You're not getting quite the dings as you were. But her story goes, between 2 and 3 a.m., one late spring morning after a rainstorm, her dog was restless and insistent about going out to the bathroom. But the dog wasn't its normal rowdy self, which she indicated that was something that was strange. Like, the dog had to go out, it had to go to the bathroom. But, like, as much as it wanted to go out, it was a little reticent to do so. She took the dog outside onto their porch, and she noticed it was quiet outside, like a dead quiet. There was no wind, and it was slightly foggy in the area. Now, I've been to this place. It's a decent-sized cabin, nice porch, decent-sized property. Not a lot of neighbors. These folks live out there year-round. It's only frequented really in the summertime, kind of like as a little resort area. But it's not, it's not habitated by people all year round. And as she went out, was on the porch with the dog went to the edge of the porch and just suddenly stopped. The dog wouldn't move, and the dog had to go outside of the bathroom, right? Wouldn't move, and it just stood there and looked out into the yard. Not its typical behavior. So Mrs. A walked over to the edge of the porch and looked off into the direction the dog was staring into. And her words exactly were, and there it was. Something was standing by the dumpster holding the lid open. It was not a bear. It was too big. The creature's right arm was holding up the cover, its left hand resting on the rim. As you can see in the photo there I put up, it's a witness sketch I did about the what the witness saw. So bear the crude drawing. That's the best I could do at the time when I was drawing it. Its waist came up to the top of the dumpster. The light coming from the outdoor security lamp allowed her to see the long hair hanging from its arm. It reminded her of Spanish moss, and it appeared to look well-groomed. And that was something that was interesting to me. You don't hear that a lot, right? You often hear a lot about it being, ratty.
Right.
Not
leaves in the hair. Right.
Yeah, leaves in the hair, that kind of thing. But what they said specifically was it looked rather like Spanish moss, well-groomed. Our meeting would be the first of several conversations, the get-togethers we'd have. Now, it was very slight, this very short, this sighting she had. It as soon as it noticed her, it kind of backed off and went away. She did notate that it had gone through some of the garbage. One of the garbage bags was placed down on the ground upon, further examination later. And she was very sincere. She wasn't embellishing. She wasn't in fear or afraid, but she seemed as just a person very curious as to what this was. She knew it wasn't a bear because she's seen plenty of bears, and trust me, you're out in that area. You see plenty of bears. She was just very curious about what it could be. Her questions to Ernie and I, will this hurt us? Well, what do you think it wants with us? And then as she started building some rapport with us, she starts describing these experiences that her and her husband have had out there for about 20, 25 years. Little things that have happened. Now, that was her first sighting she had over that time. But she would have little things that happen, guys. She would bake fresh pies or baked goods, and she'd set them up in the window, and she'd come back a little later, and they were gone. Nothing on the ground outside near the window, nothing to show it was strewn about or taken by, anything that could just... The window's high up off the ground, too. Like, I've been there. I'm not the tallest person in the world, but you would need some reach from where the ground sits to where that window is to grab from that sill. She was very careful to say she didn't believe it was a habituation situation because they didn't try to encourage it.
Right.
They didn't do things on purpose to keep this thing around. They weren't very comfortable with it being around. And until she had a sighting, she didn't know what it was, right? Her husband's blind. That's the other interesting part of this. And though he couldn't see the things, he could feel a difference when it was around. The air felt a little different. He felt a little bit uncomfortable. And he could hear things that were difference in sounds, right? You're out there long enough in the woods. You know what coyotes sound like. You know what the owls sound like. You start to understand the wildlife around you,
Right.
what it sounds like. He was starting to notice differences in the sounds. Sometimes it would mimic a songbird during the day. How do you explain that, to somebody? Well, you got to go out and investigate it, right? So Ernie and I took a trip out. Some of our other research friends took out, and they really built a good relationship with these people. They're, salt of the earth people, and no reason to report this to anybody. Besides, they didn't want anything from it. They just wanted to tell their story because they had heard of other people in these areas having these encounters, right? So you look at where they live, Clarion, Forest, Jefferson County, that little area, and the Cook Forest, and you go out and see that, that's right next to Clearfield County, right next to the Allegheny National Forest. And guys, we all know from our tenure in the field that those are very hot spot areas of Bigfoot activity. Now, there have been other people up in that area that say they've had ongoing experiences. And I just saw one today. I'm not going to mention the name of the person. I read it on one of the Facebook groups that they had investigators out to their property. Actually, our friend Ron Andrasco, no longer with us. Ron passed away last year. Was out at that person's property and did some investigating as well, and had some pretty compelling audio from that area that he experienced. So there are activity. There is activity. There is other secondary encounters that you could use to kind of validate things that happen. Now, she had noticed, I'm just going to refer back to my notes here, some observations that she had, and then I guess I'll do a couple of these observations, guys, then we'll go for the news break. And we come back, you guys can ask some questions if you have any. A smell that was sickening, a sweet smell like rotten garbage. Mrs. A will get a strange, restless feeling at times, precipitating activity. Once, while their daughter was visiting, something jumped over the hood of her car as she was pulling up the driveway.
Oh, jeez.
And it would also scratch her vehicle when she was there. It would usually leave the scratches on the trunk. She also, this is interesting, and I never put a lot of credence in this until I went through and reread the notes the other day. Small rocks or stones would be placed on the vehicle. Take that for what it's worth, right? And some observations that both Mr. and Mrs. A had made, they come back to the same area or areas year after year. They feel it's opportunistic. It'll feed off of dead or crippled deer and dumpsters. And of course, she, makes that case as she saw something rooting through her dumpster, right? And that sketch I made that I showed a little earlier, I drew that with her. So when we were meeting at Over the Mountain for that get together, I drew that with her. So it wasn't just my imagination. Of course, I'm drawing as she's telling me, and I'm not the world's greatest forensic artist by any means, but to give you a kind of an idea there.
Right.
Again, for the folks that might just be joining us, right hand up on the dumpster lid, holding it open, left hand resting on the rim. Definitely large flat nose. She didn't describe it as human. She didn't describe it as an ape.
Right.
She described it as a something.
Right.
She didn't really define it in terms of a, what's the word I'm looking for? She didn't anthropomorphize it at all. She didn't say it's the missing link. She had no idea what the hell it was.
Right. Nor do we.
She also noticed these unusual stools around her property. These stools, big gloppy pancake shits this thing would take. And she described them as big gloppy pancakes. And Ernie actually found a couple while he was out there. So, what do you do?
Not eat them.
Yeah.
Right? Not eat them. Yeah. I would hope not. That would be a real shitty pancake. Not good at all.
Oh, you went there.
I did. We're at the midway through the hour. We're going to take a quick break here, and we come back. We'll dive a little bit more into this. Right now, we're talking about the Cook Forest creature, guys. Stick around. We'll be right back. Sean Forker, Henry May, James Baker, Vance Nesbitt, Sasquatch Experience. Stay tuned.
Sasquatch Experience, Stranger Than Fiction, News, and Stories is brought to you by Dr. Squatch Soaps. 100% handcrafted and yet 100% money-back guarantee. Just click on the banner or visit Dr. Squatch for some amazing savings. And of course, our patrons. Become a patron to the Sasquatch Experience and become part of the experience for as little as $2 a month. Just visit patreon.com/Sasquatch Experience. Page 1. Well, here's a red flag if I've ever seen one. This is from Smithsonian Magazine. Scientists extract 15,000-year-old viruses from a Tibetan glacier. Researchers say the ancient pathogens are unlikely to cause humans any harm, but 28 out of the 33 viruses found are new to science. Clearly, we haven't learned our lesson yet. Oh, this is scary. So the article goes on to say, according to the study describing these microbes, published last week in the Journal of Microbiome, many of the viruses are unlike any known to researchers today. Well, then how would they know that they're going to be safe for humans? Oh, just leave this stuff alone. Walk away. You clearly haven't learned your lesson over the last year and a half. Just forward your angry emails to Sean Forker. Okay, page 2. Now look at here. We're sticking with a glacier theme. Quote, it's happening again. Ice worms emerge in Pacific Northwest glaciers. Scientist Scott Hodeling was referencing hundreds of thousands of black tiny worms emerging from a vast expanse of white snow. Ice worms were first discovered in 1887 on Alaska's Muir Glacier. They have since been spotted on most of the coastal glaciers in Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. It was an exciting discovery because for the longest time, biologists considered high-altitude glaciers sterile places where life was essentially impossible. Yet once again, science really doesn't know much, do they? You can read more into this article on Yahoo News. Page 3. Dolphins are deliberately getting high on pufferfish nerve toxins by carefully chewing and passing them around. Whoa, dude. Let me have a hit of that pufferfish. Whoa. Dolphins are thought of as the most intelligent species in the animal kingdom, and experts believe they have put their ingenuity to use in the pursuit of getting high. In an extraordinary scene filmed for a new documentary, young dolphins, which are probably hanging out by the railroad tracks, away from mom and dad, were seen carefully manipulating a certain kind of pufferfish, which, if provoked just right, releases a nerve toxin. See, even the most intelligent species on this planet just need to get stoned. Page 4. A research vessel found SpongeBob lookalikes a mile under the ocean surface. I highly encourage all of you to go to NPR and just research that topic because the pictures are there. This is incredible. An ocean expedition exploring more than a mile under the surface of the Atlantic captured a startling, silly sight this week. A sponge that looked very much like SpongeBob SquarePants. And right next to it, a pink sea star. The doppelganger for Patrick, SpongeBob's dim-witted best friend. Christopher Ma is a researcher for NOAA, or otherwise known as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. He immediately noticed the underwater creature's resemblance to the animated buddies. They are just a dead ringer for the cartoon character, Ma tells NPR. Just go to NPR and probably just type in SpongeBob. You know this article is going to come up with the pictures because this is pretty funny. And page 5. Well, here's a non-cheerful story. Great follow-up from SpongeBob Vance. A deadly bee attack in Arizona kills a man, and a 100-pound hive was removed. Yikes. Fire crews responded to a call about a bee swarm in Marianna, Arizona, northwest of Tucson, where 6 people had been stung multiple times, according to fire officials. 3 people were stung hundreds of times and rushed to the hospital, according to official. One of the victims, an unidentified man, was later pronounced dead. One firefighter was believed to have been stung about 60 times. He was taken to the hospital to be checked out, but was later released. A large open hive, estimated around 100 pounds, was located in a tree nearby, according to officials. It was not clear the state of the beehive before the attack or if any of the victims had disturbed it. Police said handlers had killed most of the bees and removed the hive, but warned local residents to be on high alert. I don't know if these are Africanized honeybees, but they sound more like hornets because we all know hornets are just a-holes with wings. And our final page 6 fun fact. This will keep you amused. The wood frog can hold its pee for up to 8 months. Talk about having to go. Wood frogs in Alaska have been known to hold their urine for up to 8 months, sticking it out through the region's long winters before relieving themselves once the temperatures increase. The urine actually helps keep the animal alive while it hibernates. That's it. Thanks again for listening to the Sasquatch Experience, stranger than fiction news and stories. And now back to this interesting conversation that we're all having. Gentlemen?
Thanks, Vance.
You're welcome.
Hold your piss for 8 months, huh?
Yeah, well.
If you ever been on a trip with James Baker, he can't hold his piss for 8 minutes. So
None of them frogs got diabetes.
Yeah.
that's true. This episode brought to you by Walter Brimley.
Diabetes.
Terrible.
Oh, absolutely.
So as before we went to the break, talking about that the sighting out in Cook Forest. Guys, the area out there is just amazing. If you ever get a chance to come out with me, we'll take a trip through it because the woods.
Okay.
It's a road through the woods, Vance, on both sides. It's picturesque.
Right.
It really is. In fact, our background that you really can't see there tonight is the Forest Cathedral in Cook's Forest. Mm-hmm. It's just a great place to be.
This provokes a number one question with me that I held off on and asking you in private, but did you get to see the dumpster?
I did.
Okay. How tall is this?
It's an average dumpster, just like you'd find outside any kind of restaurant or establishment.
Okay. All right. So you figure at the waist, what would you estimate if the dumpster's height was up to its waist? Then how would you judge its overall height then?
I would say probably 4.5 feet tall, maybe 5. I'm short, you know what I mean? So I actually, it's difficult for me to really open the lid fully or anything else.
Right. So did she give a description, or just from you looking at it would have figured if the dumpster were 4.5 feet tall, and let's not being conservative, let's say it's 4 feet tall, and it's at the waist, that would make it at about 8 foot. My estimation.
That was what my my estimate of it was. That was what her estimate of it was. Mm-hmm.
That's impressive.
With its hand being higher, of course, that's higher reach, but being able to just kind of stand there and open the dumpster and hold it open like it's no big deal. Right. Dumpster lids aren't entirely light either. Mm-hmm. They always have a little bit of weight to them, so they're not just blown open and just random vermin can't really get in. Mm-hmm. So it definitely to be able to do that, lift a bag of garbage out of it, go through. I know bears can do that. There's no question in my mind. But given that these folks lived out there for so long, they know what bears look like, right? I think at some point, folks have to give up the fact that not everything out there can be a bear.
No, exactly.
I mean, and I'm not trying to say that her sighting was ironclad. What I'm saying is what she saw and what I went out and, observed, and what Ernie, concluded that it definitely wasn't a bear. She knows bears. Right. Wasn't a bear. Just like these things that kept taking baked goods out of her window.
Right.
At a certain point, a bear is going to leave a mess.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not exactly the tightest creatures on the planet.
Right.
This just took it and ran. She never found a pan from it. Mm-hmm.
No, it kind of leans that way. Were they familiar with the term Sasquatch or Bigfoot prior to this sighting? Or it was just oddities that were happening that they really didn't put two and two together on?
No, I think maybe in their early experiences for the first 10, 15 years, they had no idea what the hell they were experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, she started putting things together. The internet became prevalent. You know, she gets out there and starts, going on the internet to see some stuff. And, again, I refer back to Henry, but neither one of you guys are schleps when it comes to, early internet access.
Mm-hmm.
But to get out there, even in some remote areas, you're still looking at dial-up internet. You're not looking at the fastest response on loading websites. And even the content that was available in the early 2000s, I got to mute somebody because I'm getting their TV. In the early 2000s, is there wasn't a lot of content out there. Right? You might have had BFRO. You might have had a couple. Even the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society site was in its infancy. So as she goes out and she learns, there's not a lot of resource for her to go to. And until she saw the presentation that was going on and the things she heard about the event up there on Over the Mountain, that got her comfortable to call us. And she had a lot of questions for us. And I think that's part of just her, curious nature, a professional person and,
Right.
experience. She just wants some answers to some of the things they're experiencing. And like I said, 20, 25 years of activity they had going on, little things that culminate in a sighting.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm sure you're going to build up a mental checklist of all these things that are happening.
Well,
But
she
what was
brought
really-
up. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Vince. No.
I was just going to say
No.
she brought up an interesting term, which is opportunistic,
Yeah.
and that is a classic case of taking advantage of an easy resource to get to. And when you think about the metric tons of food that get wasted, nationwide, I'm sure there's plenty of scrap foods in there that it could probably snack on, if not feed on completely. So it makes sense.
Well, she would also say other animals would go quiet except coyotes. And by the vocalizations her and her husband would hear, she felt they just seemed to agitate one another.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty interesting observation.
Yeah,
right?
very interesting, right?
Now, Ernie and I were out there and we heard that. The strange vocalizations, the coyotes going kind of crazy and the vocalizations back. We experienced that on one of the trips we took out there.
Mm-hmm.
What was really telling to me, though, was Mr. A, his journey from skeptic to believer with an interesting perspective because he's blind, right? So, I sat there near the fire with him. He and I would sit there and talk, and I think he and I ate a dozen or so Hebrew National hot dogs. Kind of bonded over those. It is. It's
they're a good hot dog.
And just shared some, conversation and like the feeling he would get to be able to see somebody that's not, normally abled to, have a visual sighting, but to be able to, articulate how he feels, but do it in a rational way. Like he didn't make any outrageous claims like the damn thing cyclically linked to him and said, I'm here. Like he could just feel something different.
Right.
And to the point he didn't know what it was. He's just assuming, putting two and two together, that's what it is, right? He wasn't always blind. He became blind, like through just age. You know?
Do I remember correctly? He was legally blind, but he wasn't totally blind.
Yeah, that's correct.
That? Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Right. Okay.
But legally blind people, that's a vague category.
Well, sure it is, but you can still get a sense and be able to see shadows
And I think that's I think that's at the stage he was, to be honest. Might not have been able to make out facial features, but could see a shape or
a figure, right?
Yeah.
Right.
He had some aid walking around. He wasn't, I don't want to paint the picture. You got Mr. Magoo out there, but difficulty.
Legally blind it's like you said, like my friend Patty used to be. She's legally blind. She couldn't drive, but she could use the computer if she made the aspect ratio tall enough to see the letters.
Yeah.
Right.
She could tell the difference between everybody in the room, but like certain things, like her glasses were like thick as Coke bottles.
Right.
But she was legally blind because she couldn't drive and she couldn't operate certain things because she didn't have the visual acuity reaction times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it was worse for Mr. A. I really do.
Right. I'm going to throw something at Henry just to tie these two stories together, or at least the comment. And you know what? I haven't really looked into it, but Henry, I remember a story. I don't remember which state it took place in, but it took place at an Indian reservation casino. And they had security cameras set up at the perimeter. And they claimed, they being the owners and the operators of the casino, have security camera footage of a Bigfoot going through the dumpster, lifting the lid the same way. You've heard this. Okay.
It was actually the Grease Trap, and it was in Oklahoma in the year 2000.
Okay.
It was in the year 2000. The tribe, we don't know what happened to the footage. They either erased it or somebody's got it in their private collection somewhere.
Right.
But I would love to see that footage if it hasn't been erased and destroyed already.
Right.
That could be a bad omen for them too, to have it on video as well. You know.
Well, then that is a comment.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a comment that I remember hearing about that, and that's why they didn't share it, because of the omen factor of it.
Yeah.
And they
Not
felt
that I'm trying to make excuses.
No, but they felt it was, this is and they have a whole different aspect of this altogether, and rightfully so, that, you don't mess with this. This is part of nature, and this is part of what we believe in, and we're not going to exploit it. And I
there have
understand that.
There have also been reports out of Florida, Henry, of these things going through dumpsters.
Yes.
So the behavior.
Individual named Dan Jackson said that he tried to put out some drugged orange drink to try and get a Sasquatch to knock one out. Didn't work though.
No.
Sasquatch doesn't dig Tampico. That's what it is.
Not.
Or Tang. Yeah, right.
Tang.
So what are you doing over the weekend? I'm Ruthie in the squad.
I'm Ruth.
Oh, thanks,
there it
Jane.
goes.
Yeah,
the sign. But these folks had. They were just such good people. I think that was the thing that made this case compelling for me, and why we stuck with it for a while. And then activity picked up in other parts of the of that area, and we kind of moved past it. And I know some of my friends, and I haven't talked to them in years. Shame on me. That were kind of visiting them, taking them firewood and everything, make sure they were comfortable over the winters. Actually, a researcher for the BFRO. He was on the episode Finding Bigfoot. Jeff and his wife, Julie, they were helping take care of those folks, Mr. and Mrs. A out there. It just feels weird doing all this without Ernie, because Ernie was such a big part of this investigation. You know what I mean? Right. I would love to have him here with us and share his point of view and his perspective on it, because we spent time out there. And Ernie spent more time than I out there. But just the location... and again, the things that the A said, like they never considered it a habituation because they didn't want it to happen. They didn't try to encourage it. They're out there living their life, and this thing keeps, coming around.
Right.
And you don't know how to get rid of it. Now, they never asked us to kill it or get rid of it like, that GCBRO show. But, they wanted some answers. And, sometimes answers aren't something we can provide. Right. We can suggest, we can guide, we can give you our opinion, but until somebody slabs one of these SOBs, it's just all subjective.
So besides crappy pancakes, was there any other evidence that was suspected that might have been out there than when you were there?
No footprints that I can recall. I know the vocalization was pretty interesting, that vocalizations that we heard out there did experience the stillness. But the sincerity of the people is what really took me to it. I can't say there's anything concrete. Now, Ernie and I did take a sample of hair from a fence post out that way that was pretty interesting. And we mailed it to Dr. Meldrum, mailed it certified mail, and never got to Dr. Meldrum's office. Really? Lost in the mail.
Of course.
Yeah.
Always. No, of course.
Yeah, of course, when you mark it in an envelope, Keystone Bigfoot Project, and you mail it to
Okay.
Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, Idaho State University,
Right. No.
Probably somebody intercepted it to have a good time. I'm not saying it was any nefarious government people or what have you, but it was never received, so we never got to analyze it.
Right.
But actually, at that point in time, I think Dr. Henner Fehrenbach, Henry, was still in business looking at Sasquatch hair.
Mm.
Never sent any to him, and we didn't keep any of the extra sample either. We learned the hard way that don't send it all, just send a little and keep some in reserve.
Right. Okay, so I have another question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I hate to keep stepping on you.
No, that's, by all means.
Her claim was that this took place in the springtime.
Uh-huh.
What time of year
Early
did
morning.
you go? Early morning, springtime. When did you go? What time of year was it?
It was in the early fall.
Okay.
So
All
it wasn't too long. It wasn't too long after her sighting. We did the presentation, I think in September. She contacted us maybe a week after the presentation or the week following the presentation, and Ernie and I were out within a week of her phone call where we met them for dinner, and then we had made several trips back and forth out there over the next year. And I know Ernie and Jeff and Julie were out there far more than I was. Yeah, to boot. I made a couple to a handful of trips out that way. It's hard for me to remember because we also were doing a lot of work out in another part of Clearfield County so sometimes we combine trips.
Right.
And I can't find my journal from that time. I found my notes from this case because I had it in its own file, but I can't find my journal from that year where I kept a lot of my activities for, I kept things like moon phases, temperature, precipitation, on those particular days. And then not only did I take my notations, but I'd also take printouts from the National Weather Service the following day and put them in there just so I could match it up to make sure that my observations were in sync with what was actually, legitimately reported. And I did that for probably from 2009 to 2012, 2007 to 2012. I did that. I'm just missing some of those journals.
Well, in a lot of witness testimonies and experiencers on a regular basis, it seems that activity ramps up in the spring and in the fall. So you may have been there at a good time when activity may have ramped up again.
Yeah, and we've had this conversation many times. Is there something such as migration or, I don't know. I think it's opportunity. Don't you, James? Like, I don't know if it's so much a seasonal thing as it is an opportunity thing.
We've talked about how, you got the Appalachian Trail, you got a variety of places, like it could migrate. I mean, you look at most animals, like a bear can have a migration, of anywhere from 50 to 100 miles from its base point. It matters to where it is the bear you see on Tuesday may be a completely different one. Or, like sharks. Sharks move to where the food sources are. Once the food's been depleted, it moves on to another source, and sharks can go how many hundred of miles, and then just start a new area because that's where the food source is. And when that dries up, they go 40 miles the other way and see what goes on. So why
Henry, what do you
be the same way?
Henry, what do you think about all this?
Well, if there's migration going on, and let's say they go through a certain area at a certain time of year, they go through this one area at a certain time of year. It'd be interesting to see how an individual or a researcher can try and get a pattern down. Although with these creatures, it's really hard to make a pattern.
It is. Because I was just going to say, Henry, because there's perception and there's reality, right? And the reality is based on data. And just in Pennsylvania alone, the reality is sightings happen all year. Is there a time where there's more activity than others? Well, I don't know if the data shows that. Part of the problem is you got a lot of displaced data in a bunch of different areas, right? You have Stan Gordon's personal data, Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society that Eric Altman and I are starting to post back up, my data, bunch of little groups in Pennsylvania. Now you got all these Facebook groups with people reporting sightings. But the problem is on the Facebook book groups with people reporting sightings is nobody's vetting them and going out to investigate them because they happen so damn fast.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. So we could be chasing those for years. And then I would probably guarantee you that if you plotted that all out year over year, season over season, I don't know if you'd see much difference month to month.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. My gut tells me we're going to see consistency. I guess the emotional part of me would like to say, well, yes, migration's a fact. And I would say that during the fall, there's more sight. We just don't know that. And I really don't think the evidence supports it. I think when you're trying to build a case and you're trying to prove your own narrative, you'll look at data from a biased lens. I don't think you're going to look at it unbiased.
Right.
So you really got to remove your personal feelings from it and look at the data. And because the data is so assorted and it's dispersed, I don't know how anybody could come to that conclusion rationally. Younger Forker, back in the day, I thought migration was a thing. I told Bobby Short, yeah, it has to be. Mm-hmm. Sightings only happen so-and-so. But, as you get experience and you move through this and you look at the sightings in the data, it tells a different story, I think. But, I'm not trying to, push a narrative either. I'm just trying to look at the evidence and see what the evidence tells us.
Right. I've had a thought a few times where, and regarding migration, and this has been a couple years now of me having this thought, it could be possible that youngers don't migrate, but the elders, there's that word again. The elder may move to a warmer climate because it can't tolerate it. Just like we do, your senior citizens go down to Florida for the winter and come back, but maybe the younger generation may just stay in one area and scout that entire 50-mile radius area, whatever, and be opportunistic for those locations. But yet those that are well seasoned, that's the word I should have used, maybe they do until they have the opposite. Finally, or you have the opposite, maybe.
Right, where you have the youngers that are saying now it's time for you to go out of this territory and venture off into your own and establish your own territory, right? So what we think may be migration may not be migration at all. It's just the true, gestational, circle of life situation.
Empty right.
Yeah. Time for you to leave and go off and do your own.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with migration. I guess my point I'm just trying to make is a lot of people clench onto that theory, but until you look at the holistic evidence, I just don't think that claim could be made. And if you look at that evidence, guys, I'm telling you, my gut says it's going to be a lot different than we think. And look, the data's got to be a lot more than just pinpoints on a map. You have to be able to cascade through that data, sort through that data over times, seasons, years, and look at a lot of different variables into that. Right. You can't just say, well, we're going to look at a concentration of sightings. Well, it just doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you at that particular time there were a hell of a lot of Bigfoot reports.
Right.
Were there a lot of people out there? What was the deer population at that time?
Mm-hmm.
What was the food sources like? Was it a drought year? Was it a rainy year? John Green writes in his book, what was it, 20 inches of rain, Henry?
Mm-hmm.
And areas of the country that experienced over 20 inches of rain or more annually, had more Bigfoot sightings.
Mm-hmm.
He writes a whole chapter in his book, Eastern Action, talking about the events happening in Pennsylvania and on the East Coast. And, there's always been kind of that divide on the East and West because the East Coasters tend to accept a little bit more of a, I don't want to say paranormal because that's painting, but they accept more than people on the West Coast, right? I guess I don't want to say I'm not East Coast I'm East Coast by geography, West Coast by principle. I guess I'll believe a Bigfoot and UFOs are connected when I see one drop down in front of me. But other people have seen that, so what the hell do I know? I'm not out here to make enemies. I'm just
but it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be both.
And you know what? That's a possibility. It's not one I like to entertain, but I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong many other times in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going back to what you were saying about Eastern action, John Green told us himself. He said, "I think there's more reports coming out of the East these days." And this was 2006. He said, "There's more reports coming out of the East than there are out of the Pacific Northwest."
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you look. Now, I'm not saying this to piss anybody off. I think there's it's just kind of funny to me that there's a intake of Bigfoot sightings where there's also a lot of conferences going on. Tennessee, Ohio, other places. I'm not throwing any stones there. I'm just saying it's kind of Florida. It's kind of interesting to me that sightings on a certain website get blown up when they're getting ready to have an event in certain areas of the country. Take that for what it is, but I think you have to look at there's more people investigating Bigfoot sightings than there ever have been before. And because it's not so tongue-in-cheek, ha, 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 laughing at somebody when they report seeing something, more and more people are willing to talk about it, and more people are taking it seriously enough to investigate it. Part of that's wonderful. The other part is some of those people investigating have no idea about the history of the field and the things that have been done. And you got to do a little homework first.
Oh, agreed.
So we look at this data long term, see what it says. Migration, I don't know. Damned if I know. I just think it's a little bit, there's a lot more to it than we're thinking. We got to look at it from an open mind, and we have to, remove as much bias as possible. Of course, to the point I just made about, sightings being reported in areas where they're getting ready to have conferences, there's also a large concentration of research in those areas too. So as much as I want to be cheeky, I could just turn around and kick myself in the balls because, let's be honest, there's a hell of a lot of research in those areas too, right?
Yeah.
It's
So,
also
cynic to the end, Vance, I guess. That's me. Cynic to the end. Go ahead, James.
It's also tough to prove migration or any kind of system because it's not like you can tag a penguin or tag a shark or tag whatever. It's not like you can tag the thing and go, oh yeah, it's at the mini mart today. Look through the dumpster. Tomorrow it's over at Mary's house stealing pies. You don't
to give some reference though, the NAW.
They tried.
RC. I don't even.
NAWAC.
NAWAC. Yeah, there we go. I can think now. North American Wood Ape Conservancy did a tagging project, and they believe they did tag one. And if you go to their website, woodape.org, and go to the Wichita monologues and some of their other papers they've written, I think you'd see some of that data is pretty compelling. They're doing things, I think, the right way. I don't know what much is getting done right now, but some of the stuff they've done, and it's been featured again in Seth Breedlove's documentaries on the Trail of Bigfoot. You get some insight into that. So there is work being done. You just got to look at the data, and you have to have people that know what the hell they're talking about to sift through the data.
Yeah.
Right? As our friend Brian just says, he was just in Florida. Everything's damp there in Florida. Yeah, that's very much true.
Sweat.
Sweat. That's disgusting. Don't say that word. You're fired.
Yay!
So, again, it's been some time since I've been up to those folks. It's been some time since I've been out in that area, period. I'd like to go out and make another trip out that way just to see if there's anything still going. I went and took another trip out to some of my old stomping grounds, and they're getting pretty well grown up. I think some of the... It's an interesting camera angle. Some of the areas aren't being well maintained because of, a lack of capacity to do so during COVID and everything.
Right.
It'd be nice to get out there and see those places again and see if there's anything still going. See if those folks are still out there, because it'd be nice to catch up with them again. So imagine one day some fat kid knocks on your front door. Hi, remember me?
Yes, you're the creature we were talking about.
Absolutely. Next week, I don't know what we're going to be talking about. Something hopefully a little bit more exciting than this. I always love this sighting, guys,
this is
because
an
it's
interesting
nostalgic.
case. Yes.
The folks were interesting. They were very nice people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of those typical hair-raising encounters where it's beating down their back door and throwing the old lady around the living room. It was just a series of events that happened over 20 to 25 years that finally culminated in a sighting for a lady one spring morning.
Right.
And the rest is Bigfoot history.
Right. But it's an interesting story. I love that one.
Yeah. And there have been some interesting sightings and encounters that have happened out in the Allegheny National Forest. Aside from my own, which has been chronicled on this show many times, our friend Brian Davis also had some experiences out there. I'd love to get him on the show and talk about them sometime.
Dave Groves
had a ATV encounter that happened out in the Allegheny National Forest. You're talking about places that are just 9 minutes away from the Cook's Forest, where this happened. So it's supported by other sighting reports. Take that for what it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
You got a pie-stealing Bigfoot.
Exactly.
Leaving gloppy pancake shits in their yard. So that's where we're going to leave it. Probably all the pie. Could be. Henry, why don't you tell folks where they can find you?
Oh, you can find me on Facebook at HB or Henry B. May the 4th.
James, where can folks catch up with you?
The pictures in the post office are not me. Usually if you see Sean, I'm not far behind when it comes to a lot of these things, even though we went to a conference without me this weekend. But, I had to work. My manager is a slave driver. But usually you can see me. Now, right now you can't because I'm hidden behind the Dr. Squatch logo.
Thankfully.
Go to the SasquatchExperience.com. Click on the banner to support the show. One more way you can contribute.
Tell you, that soap is working. I got new follicles.
Okay, well, it's not a miracle, folks. The results vary by user. A special thanks to our executive producers, Brian Corbin, Tom Yock, and Gail Fredericks. Don't want to forget about them. Sometimes I do, and it's not very nice of me. Good show. Good folks, supporters of the show. Couldn't do it without them. Vance, where can folks find you?
Oh, they can find me here by the palm tree in Studio 401 fighting off a tornado, but it's all good. Facebook, Vance A. Nesbitt, or Instagram, Vance_Nesbitt_STF News.
Yeah, that's news, not nudes. Please don't go to STF.
Yeah. Send news. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, of course, you can find us, folks, Sasquatch Experience on Facebook, Instagram, Squatch EXP on Twitter, SasquatchExperience.com to catch up with what's going on with the latest. Go to the bookshelf, see what Henry's been reading because he reads a lot. And, of course, me, I'm Sean the Fork Chop Forker. You can find me anywhere at Sean Forker, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. That's where I'm at. Next week's show, just stay tuned to the website and Facebook for more details. Henry, take us out.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
Thanks again, folks, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.